Hi guys, it's Tamara coming back at you with another video. Welcome back to my channel. We're going to continue our conversation just for today, and then we're going to bounce to a new conversation. But we're going to continue our conversation about unethical psychotherapists. I recently did a consultation with someone who lived in Hawaii, and the consultation was about an unethical therapist and what to do if you encounter an unethical therapist, how to deal with it, what to say, what not to say, all that good stuff. So I spent a good hour talking to this person about some of the things that they can do and some of the things that they want to watch out for. The problem was that this individual, I think, felt slightly traumatized by the encounter with this supposed therapist. And because there's hardly any regulations in Hawaii for mental health professionals, anybody can claim to be a psychotherapist, hang a shingle, and have a business. And so, that's pretty frightening. And as a matter of fact, here in the United States as well, there are certain areas where you can do the same. So I want to talk about that with you today, about unethical therapists and what to look for and what they what their MO is, modus operandi. And then we're going to start a brand new conversation on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of next week. So the benefits for you in this video is that you're going to get a chance to learn some new concepts about unethical therapists. And I'm going to post all that stuff over here so that you can follow along. But you're going to get a chance to learn some new concepts. And you're also going to receive tips on identifying an unethical therapist. So let's go ahead and just jump right in, okay? And so, as always, I have my notes. So you're going to see me looking at the camera, looking at my notes. So I have two questions, and I want to read those. And then I'm going to also pick and pull apart the topic and then give you some tips on what to look for. All right, so here's question number one. This question's from Kimmy. And she says, my therapist is married, but I feel he likes my daughter. She's 25 and he's 45. And she put an exclamation point. She says, what should I do? This is a difficult question, okay? So here's the way that I would deal with this. First of all, I would not share with anybody at all that you think that your daughter's therapist likes her. I would stay away from that. And one of the reasons why is because, number one, you do need concrete proof. Number two, you would need proof to identify what specific behaviors makes you think that he likes her. Right? Are these just, comments that could be taken all kind of different ways, or are these specific comments? Is this person coming on to your daughter, and if so, how and in what ways? The other thing is, do we know the relationship between the two, right? Is there equal flirtation or equal reciprocal feelings? What's going on here? So the number one thing I would encourage you to stay away from is saying anything about this to anyone until you actually have proof. That's going to keep you out of the fire, and it's going to keep your daughter in therapy. The other piece of this is, let's just hypothesize that, okay, he does like your daughter. He's a really grown man compared to your 25-year-old daughter. In a situation like that, I would pull her, right? I would encourage her to find another therapist and go to somebody that's either a female or go to somebody who's more appropriate, more of a fatherly kind of a figure, a grandfather kind of a figure. If she refuses to leave therapy because she is 25, then there's really nothing that you can do but just be that support for your daughter. It's a really tough rope to walk because she's 25 and she's in therapy, and she may not want to move. She may feel a connection to this therapist. So I think your best bet is to share your concerns with your daughter, see where she's at. If she disagrees with you, you do have to take the low road and the back road. She's 25, and there's really nothing that you can do. Now, if you see behaviors that are questionable, I would encourage you to keep like a tab or a listing, and then document the dates of when you found out about a certain behavior, or document your concerns. Just in case something does come of this, you'll have like a little notepad with some bullet points that include your concerns. That's a tough one, but thank you, Kimmy, for that question. Hang in there. All right, and I'm going to be talking too today about some of the things that you can look for, and I'm going to give you some new terms, so that might help you as well, Kimmy. All right, so this next question is from Michael. And Michael says, my father is seeing a narcissistic therapist. Wow, there's plenty of those. And there's also some good ones too. So he says, my father is seeing a narcissistic therapist. How do I know when to end this? My dad is 90 and I have power of attorney rights. What do I do? All right, so if you have power of attorney rights, I would suggest that you have a conversation with your father. Say, look, this is a therapist that I'm highly concerned about, and then have some concrete reasons why, right? You don't want to just be like, so I get a vibe that he's a narcissist. No, you want to be able to say, here's some concrete reasons why I have these concerns. Here's what I need to do. Here's what I think that you should do. Because your power of attorney, you might be able to get some information on your father's counseling with this person. You might also be able to talk to the counselor yourself and get a feel for who they are. And your father may give you the permission to find him another therapist. So you could definitely ask him, you know, if I found another therapist for you, would you be open to it, right? You know, kids and elderly people are similar in the sense that when they find a comfort zone, because they are so mistrusting and they are so stuck in their ways, that both groups, elderly people and children or teenagers, would rather just stay where they are, right? Especially if they're comfortable and they've developed a relationship. So you guys have hit me with two really important questions, but very difficult, because these are two populations that are so tough to work with because they stay where they're comfortable and they dig their heels in, right? So let's just talk a little bit further, guys, about unethical therapists. What makes an unethical therapist? There are two things that I want you to keep in mind as you think about unethical therapists, okay? There's a thing known as boundary crossings and boundary violations, okay? Boundary crossings and boundary violations. Here's the difference. A boundary crossing is not necessarily unethical. A boundary crossing is crossing over a boundary in hopes of either leveling the playing field between the client and therapist, offering support to the client, being an emotional support for the client. But the boundary crossing needs to be evaluated by the therapist. Do I really want to make this boundary crossing? Do I really not? If I do cross this boundary, is there a reason why I'm doing that? And if so, can I document my reasons in a logical fashion? That's a boundary crossing. A boundary crossing is looking for all the potential problems and then surmising the consequences and the benefits. A boundary violation is very different. A boundary violation is explicit and complete violation of a boundary. So let me give you some examples. A boundary crossing. I think that there have been times in my career, especially with children and families, where I have engaged in boundary crossing. But boundary crossing on my end had some really good benefits. So I worked in a urban environment with juvenile delinquents who were on probation. And those kids needed a different kind of therapy. They weren't into talk therapy where you would just sit and talk to the therapist and walk away with a prescription. They were not into that. They were very restless, very inattentive, impulsive, mistrusting, I should say. Very argumentative, confrontational, hurt, defensive, traumatized, ousted by society, the list goes on. My therapy with these kind of kids included a lot of boundary crossings, right? So these kind of kids did not want to come into my office and talk. I had to go to the classroom and talk to them. There were times where I talked to them out in the hallway while sitting on the floor in their school environment. And there were times when I would go to the cafeteria and have lunch with some of my kids and talk them through some of their issues that they were having throughout the school day. There were times when I would do phone sessions with my kids. There were times I would provide free therapy to some of my kids if their parents' insurance ended or they didn't have resources. There were also times when I would go to their school. So if I had a client come to my office and he was struggling for the day in school, I would lock my office up, go to that school and have a therapy session. Those are boundary crossings, right? Because I'm crossing over into his school. I'm giving free therapy when insurance has ended. I'm sitting out out in the school hallway talking to a kid about what's going on. Those are all boundary crossings, right? I'm crossing the boundary line. There were also times when I would hug my clients and my clients would hug me. They would write me letters, send letters to my P.O. box, things like that. Those are all boundary crossings, but they're not unethical boundary crossings, right? There's a boundary. A boundary is like a separation, right? And if you think about it as like something that kind of like covers you completely, right? A professional's boundaries are like completely all around them, and the client is on the outside of that boundary. But when there's a specific job that needs to be done, you need to cross that boundary. It doesn't mean that's unethical or illegal. A boundary violation is when you completely violate your ethics code as well as the law in your state. Sexual relationships with clients, dealing drugs to clients, what's that word I'm looking for? Bartering, right? So paying a client for services, or I'm sorry, that's not correct. Bartering is when a therapist hires a client to perform a duty for them, like clean their house, paint, fix up around their office in exchange for therapy, right? That is a total boundary violation at times, but it can also be a boundary crossing. So as you can see, it can get complicated. Another boundary violation would be a therapist using a client as a therapist, right? So telling all their personal issues to the client. That's a boundary violation. So those are two things I want you to keep in mind, all right? Boundary violations and boundary crossings can be very complicated, but the boundary violation is the most detrimental because it usually goes against the law. So how do you know if your therapist is being unethical? I'm going to go down some things, all right? And I have 9 of them. So here's a couple of things that I have seen in my profession and a couple of things that I've heard other people deal with. And I'm just going to run down this list because I don't want the video to be too long, okay? So the first thing that makes a therapist unethical is not separating sessions from administrative duties. So answering the phone while you're in their office, typing on a computer while, doing other notes and other clinical material while they're having a session with you, answering a phone call right in the middle of a session, especially if it's not an emergency or important, filing away paperwork and working on files, auditing, all that kind of stuff while they're having a session with you. Absolute no. Too much self-disclosure. So a therapist who tells you about their failing marriage, a therapist who tells you about their traumatic miscarriage and all the emotions they felt. Now, self-disclosure can also be therapeutic, right? Because self-disclosure says, I'm with you, I get you, I know your pain. But some self-disclosure really is self-serving, because what it does is it allows the therapist to get off their chest what's bothering them. So too much self-disclosure can definitely be unethical. Neglects your calls or emails. You don't want a therapist who neglects to call you back at least within 12 hours. And you don't want a therapist who totally ignores your emails no matter how many you send, right? So that can be unethical as well. No regard for your well-being. So they do whatever they want to do to test things, like do research on you or, do testing on you just to see how something would work, right? Or a therapist who completely drops you as far as a patient or a client because you're not paying your bill on time, right? All those things can be unethical. Causing what's called iatrogenic neurosis. I'm going to put that over here, iatrogenic neurosis. And that's when the professional creates a problem or a disease within the client, right? So you've already come to the therapist with a problem, and now that therapist is causing more problems with you. And so now you've got a second problem that the professional has caused. Iatrogenic neurosis. Gives you personal details. Again, you shouldn't know where your therapist lives. You shouldn't know where they bought their car. You shouldn't know how many times they've been married. You shouldn't know what colleges and schools your therapist's children and grandchildren goes to, right? You shouldn't know about marital troubles that they're having. All of those things are way too personal, and it almost burdens you as the client in a sense. So that's a total no-no. You don't get the paperwork. So if you're confused about the paperwork and the therapist isn't explaining it to you, an unethical act is occurring, right? You want to be able to understand the paperwork. You want to be able to have the therapist explain it to you clearly, all right? And then you feel confused and you get favoritism. You don't need that, right? You feel confused. You don't walk out of that session feeling like you've gotten anything. You feel perplexed, like what just happened in there, right? You don't want that. And then also favoritism, right? Do they favor you over other clients? Do they let you get away with things that other clients don't get away with, right? All those things are unethical. Some of those things are boundary violations, and some of those things are boundary crossings. But I want you to keep in mind as we move along on this channel, which is a counseling channel for growth, right? Keep in mind that unethical therapists are they're hard to pinpoint because they can do some good things and then they do some bad things, right? Or they do all bad things, but they cloak it under good. Or you're just completely uninformed about their behavior. So it's important as you move forward, not only on this channel to learn things, but maybe in your own therapy, it's important that you be able to identify boundary crossings and boundary violations. It makes all the difference in how sufficient and efficient your therapy truly is. All right, guys, thanks so much for being with me today on this video. I encourage you to give it a thumbs up if it was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments section if this is the kind of stuff that helps you and that you want to see more of. I will bring some more stuff to this channel if this video and this kind of content is what you like, so stay tuned. I also encourage you to hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. That way you can get updates about my videos, and you can also ask me questions that I answer in videos such as this. So, all right, guys, I will see you on Monday with a brand new video. We're going to jump in to some other things I think you're going to be interested in. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.